Uh, I'm recording this video for prospective and current students in the Education, Conflict, and Peacebuilding Master's Degree Program in the Institute for Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of Hargeisa. And I want to congratulate you all on embarking on what is a very important, meaningful, and urgent area of study. So around the world, of course, there are a multitude of contexts that are affected by conflict, such as Afghanistan and Colombia, Cyprus, Israel and Palestine, Korea, Somalia, South Sudan, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, and so on. And in these contexts, that conflict has an effect upon education at all levels, from primary schooling all the way up to tertiary education and adult education, non-formal education, and so on. Schools and universities are targeted. They are destroyed by the conflict, by the war. Teachers and students are victims as well, and they are targets of war. There are casualties. They lose their livelihoods. Children are abducted to become child soldiers. Diseases spread, and normal life as we know it becomes unthinkable. And there are also some long-term psychosocial effects after the war is over, how to deal with trauma and reintegration into society for those child soldiers, for those teachers who lost their jobs, for those refugees who were displaced into other contexts. How do we disarm? How do we reintegrate into society and rebuild schools and retrain teachers and educators? These are all necessary elements of what it takes to create a peaceful society in the aftermath of war. So education is a critical element of this. And this is in conflict zones, of course, but it's also in other so-called stable settings where people are displaced too. So we have IDPs, we have refugees going across borders, going into areas where they can find safe havens and protection away from the ongoing conflict. So conflict spreads across those borders, and equally the global north, countries and various entities such as corporations are implicated within the wars that are taking place in southern context and other conflict affected contexts. We have, for example, today 120 million refugees in the world, according to UNHCR, and that's about a 2% of the total global population is displaced and are refugees. But education is not only affected by the conflict, education also affects the conflict, so it can amplify or perpetuate misunderstandings, perpetuate problems and conflict and violence in society. So there can be authoritarian cultures in schools, for example, or corporal punishment, or the stress that is caused by extreme examination culture, or military and police who become teachers in those schools and reproduce a militarization and securitization of the institutions, the schooling institutions. There are maybe exclusion of certain ethnic and gendered groups from education that can then reproduce and lead back into that conflict. There might be biased curriculum that teaches a dehumanized perspective of the other. So how can we overcome and replace these biased curriculums toward curriculums of peace? And there are also constraining funding mechanisms. So some of these societies may be fragile, and the governments may not have the funds that are necessary to build the schools, to train the teachers, to create a sustainable process of education in those societies. So we need to look as well into the political economic factors that are important in education and conflict. So as you can see, education has at least two phases. It can be both part of the problem, but also part of the solution. And this master's degree in education, conflict, and peacebuilding at IPCS, it will prepare you as a school teacher, as a university professor, as a school administrator, as researchers examining these areas, as government policymakers, and as field workers working in NGOs to critically analyze education's role in conflict and peace building, both the positive and the negative roles of education. And you will be equipped with theoretical and practical tools to do this, including curriculum development tools, including pedagogical skills, including researcher capacities that we would develop through the program, and policy development practice to better support you in your work as a peace educator and as a educational scholar thinking about the role of education in conflict and peace, to help prepare you in a plethora of context, from stable settings to conflict affected and post-conflict regions. So graduates of the Education, Conflict, and Peacebuilding master's degree will be well suited for employment in schools and universities, in local and international NGOs and research institutes and government think tanks, and in international organizations such as the United Nations. So I want to congratulate you again for embarking on what will be a very exciting journey at the Institute for Peace and Conflict Studies, and I'm very excited to meet you there very soon.